My mother's cottage smelled of dried lavender and old wood, and the specific warmth of a house that had been loved properly for a long time. She had grown up there. Kept the deed in a small cedar box on her dressing table. When she died, she left the box and the deed and the specific instruction that it should pass to me, not because she loved me more than anyone else in the world, but because she understood me most completely and understood that the cottage was the kind of thing I would need. A place that was entirely mine. My father placed the deed on the dining table beside a document I had not seen before on a Thursday evening, and he looked at me with the expression he wore when he had decided something and was delivering it rather than discussing it. The Capone organization has a claim against this household, he said. Against me. Against the assets. I looked at the documents. There is a condition, he said. For settlement. I already knew about the condition. The city knew about the condition. When the Capone Empire made a claim against a family with daughters, it made the same kind of condition it had made 11 times before, and the rumor about those 11 times was not entirely rumor. Iris, I said. Iris has declined, he said. I looked at him. Iris was 26 and had her mother's face and my father's talent for arranging the world so that its difficulties landed on someone else. She had declined from the sitting room 2 floors above us, where she had been crying since the representative from the Capone organization arrived that afternoon. I had heard the crying. It had the specific quality of crying designed to be heard. And you are asking me, I said. I'm telling you, he said. He placed his hand on the deed. This goes into the fire tonight if you do not agree. I looked at the cedar box. I thought about my mother. About the cottage and the dried lavender and the old wood and the warmth of a house that had been loved correctly. About the last thing she had that was entirely mine. Do not, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Then you know what to do, he said. I sat at the dining table for a long time after he left the room. Iris came down eventually. She stood in the doorway in her dressing gown with her eyes still red from the performed crying, and she looked at me with the expression I had been receiving from her my entire life. The specific compound of guilt and relief, and the particular resentment of someone who feels bad about being relieved. Hazel, she said. Go back upstairs, Iris, I said. She went back upstairs. I sat alone at the table with my mother's deed, my father's ultimatum, and the specific quality of stillness that arrives when you have already made the decision and are simply sitting inside it before the world requires you to act on it. I had always been the second option in this house. The one who received what was left after everything had been distributed to the people who mattered more. The one whose feelings were acknowledged only when acknowledging them cost nothing. The one who could be threatened with the destruction of her most precious thing because her most precious thing had never been protected the way the most precious things of people who mattered were protected. I was 23 years old, and I had been invisible in my own family since my mother died. And I was tired, with a deep, specific tiredness of someone who has spent years carrying things alone, of being surprised by it. I picked up the deed. Put it in my bag. I went upstairs to pack. The chapel was small and rain-soaked and smelled of stone and old candles. I wore a dress that had belonged to my grandmother. Heavy ivory lace that moved the way heavy things move, slowly, with the weight of itself. I had chosen it not for beauty but for the practical reason that it was the only formal dress I owned that fit correctly. Beauty had not seemed like the relevant consideration for this particular occasion. The ceremony was brief. The officiant spoke words that had been arranged for legal sufficiency rather than meaning. I said what I was required to say. Vincent Capone said the same with the specific flatness of someone completing a contractual obligation and aware of precisely what it was. I looked at him during the ceremony because I had decided that looking away would be a form of pretense I could not afford. He was taller than I had expected from what I had heard and built with the specific physical authority of someone whose body had been through things and had adapted accordingly. His face was the kind of face that had been handsome once and had been through enough since that handsome was now the least interesting thing about it. He did not look at me. Not during the ceremony. Not in the limo that took us from the chapel. He looked at the city moving past the window with the expression of someone who has been in this vehicle on this road many times and has stopped registering the scenery. The rumors you have heard, he said. We were 7 minutes from the estate. He had not spoken before this. Waited. They are true enough, he said. Women do not last in my house. I am telling you this not as a threat but as information you should have. He paused. You are not my wife. You are a transaction. Do not mistake surviving this arrangement for belonging to it. He looked at me then, for the first time, with dark eyes that carried the specific quality of someone who has decided to be honest about something because honesty is the only kindness available. Understand, I said. He looked back at the window. You have more composure than the others, he said. I've had practice, I said. He said nothing else for the remaining 4 minutes. The Capone estate was exactly what I had been told to expect, and nothing I had been prepared for. It rose from the northern edge of the city with the specific architecture of a building designed for permanence and defense rather than comfort. Stone, iron gates, the particular cold that large institutional spaces maintain regardless of the temperature outside. I was shown to the north wing by a member of the household staff who communicated through the quality of her efficiency that she considered this escort an inconvenience. The north wing had dust on the surfaces and linens that needed replacing and windows that had not been opened in some time. The warmth that houses acquire when they are lived in with care was entirely absent. I stood in the middle of the room, and I looked at it for a long time. Then I went to find cleaning supplies. I was invisible in that house for 2 weeks. Not mistreated. Ignored. There is a specific difference, and it matters. Mistreatment would have required someone to notice me enough to direct something at me. The staff of the Capone estate had assessed the situation with a particular accuracy of people who understood the power dynamics of the house they worked in and had concluded that investing attention in the north wing's occupant was not strategically sound. The warm water I requested arrived cold. The linens I asked to be replaced were not replaced. The meals that were brought were the last priority of a kitchen managing a large household and arrived reflecting this. I did not make a scene. I found an old sewing machine in a storage room near the end of the wing's corridor. It needed adjustment but it was functional. I had my mother's scarves in the bag I had packed, 3 of them, the ones she had worn most often, and that still carried something of her if I was willing to be precise about what I meant by that. I repaired them in the evenings with the focused quiet of someone doing something that matters to no one else and matters completely to them. I found him in the library at 2 in the morning. I had not known the library was occupied. The light was low enough from the doorway that I had seen it as empty. I had been coming to return the book I had borrowed 3 days before because the habit of returning things promptly had been installed in me by my mother, and 17 years of her absence had not removed it. He was in the chair by the far window. He looked at me the way people look at things that have appeared in a space they consider private. I'm sorry, I said. I did not know you were here. He looked at the book in my hand. You have been using the library, he said. Yes, I said. Can stop. I did not say stop, he said. I put the book back on its shelf. I was at the door when he said, What is that smell? Turn. Lavender, I said. And soap. I made a lavender soap from dried flowers I found in the garden. The one near the east wall. He looked at me. The east garden has not been used in years, he said. I know, I said. I cleared part of it last week. There were lavender plants under the overgrowth. He said nothing. I went back to the north wing. I lay on the repaired linen I had washed myself and looked at the ceiling, and I thought about my mother's cottage and the dried lavender on her dressing table and the old wood and the warmth. Thought, I can make warmth. I know how. I have been doing it in cold spaces my entire life. I discovered the pantry situation on a Tuesday. Not deliberately. I had gone to the kitchen at 7 in the morning because the delivered breakfast had not arrived, and I had decided that waiting was less efficient than going to find it. What I found instead was a specific pattern in the inventory ledger that the head of the kitchen staff had left open on the counter, a pattern recognizable to anyone who had managed household accounts in a family where money was unreliable and therefore required careful watching. 3 members of the kitchen staff were taking from the pantry in amounts that were individually small and collectively significant. I stood at the counter and looked at the ledger for a moment. Then I put on the apron hanging by the door. The kitchen staff looked at me with the assessing attention of people who had not expected this development and were determining how to respond to it. I did not address the ledger. I asked what was available and I cooked. Not elaborate. My mother's recipes were never elaborate because my mother had understood that food which required complexity to be good was relying on the wrong thing. What she had understood, and what she had taught me in the kitchen of the cottage on the ordinary evenings of my childhood, was that the right combination of simple things could reach something in a person that complicated things could not access. I made what she had made on the evenings when she wanted the house to feel like itself. The smell moved through the kitchen and into the corridor in the way that certain smells move, decisively, announcing themselves before they arrive. Vincent came in at noon. He looked at the table. He sat. He ate in silence. I watched him with the peripheral attention I had developed for reading people who did not intend to be read. I watched his hands on the fork. I watched the specific quality of his stillness change slightly as he ate. Not visibly, not to anyone looking for the large signs. The small ones. The slight release in the set of his jaw. The way his eyes moved from the middle distance to the plate with the attention of someone who has stopped going through emotion and started actually doing something. He finished. He looked at the plate. He stood and left. The next morning, there was a jewelry box on the dining table. No note. No explanation. A small box with a clasp that opened to reveal a pair of earrings, simple but of quality. The specific kind of gift that someone gives when they are acknowledging something without being willing to say what they are acknowledging. I put the earrings in. I went back to the north wing. I thought about my father's dining table and the ultimatum and the deed in my bag, and I thought, this is a different kind of house. But I have been making cold houses warmer my entire life, and I know how to do it without losing myself in the doing. The silk arrived on a Friday. A tailor with a measuring tape and 3 bolts of fabric was waiting in the main hallway when I came down. He had been sent by Vincent, who had given no instructions beyond the bringing of the fabric and the execution of whatever was required. The tailor asked what I would like. I had a moment of the specific difficulty that comes from being asked to express a preference after a long period of not being asked and not being permitted. The difficulty was shorter than it would have been 3 weeks before. I had been practicing, in the small daily moments of the kitchen and the library and the East Garden, the specific skill of knowing what I wanted and saying it. Emerald green, I said. For the dinner dress. And something practical in the navy for every day. The tailor nodded, measured, made his assessments and left. I wore the emerald dress to dinner on the following Friday. I had done my hair the way my mother had shown me when I was 16. Simple but with the specific intentionality of something done correctly rather than quickly. Vincent looked at me when I came in. Not the assessing glance he had given me in the limo. Longer look. The look of someone encountering something that does not match their existing understanding and is updating. We ate mostly in silence, which had become the texture of our shared meals. A silence that had shifted from the impersonal to something that was beginning to be companionable. You are starting to look like a Capone, he said. I looked at him. That makes you a target, he said. For people who want to reach me through what I am associated with. Understand, I said. I'm telling you, he said, so that you are not surprised. Not to frighten you. I am not frightened, I said. He looked at me. No, he said slowly. I am beginning to understand that you are not. Iris came on a Wednesday afternoon with flowers she had not bought herself and a smile she had assembled for the occasion. I saw her arrive from the East Garden where I had been working. I watched her look at the gate and the house and the guard who opened it for her with the specific expression of someone arriving somewhere they expected to find ruin and finding instead something they had not anticipated. She found me in the sitting room. She looked at me with the compound expression I had been receiving from her my entire life, but with new elements added. The guilt and the relief and the resentment were all present. But there was something else now. Something that sat below the performed sisterly warmth she had arranged for the visit. You look well, she said. The way people say things that are true, but that they had hoped would not be true. Am well, I said. The house is, she looked around. Different from what I expected. What did you expect? Said. She did not answer directly. She talked about our father, who was still managing the debt despite the arrangement, which told me the arrangement had settled the claim against the house but not generated the prosperity Iris had apparently assumed would follow from it. She talked about her own situation with the particular careful brightness of someone who wants something and is building toward asking for it. I gave her tea, and I listened, and I did not offer what she was building toward. Before she left, she walked through the main corridor, and she saw the jewelry and the silk and the way the guard who was stationed near the east wing nodded to me as we passed. I watched her see all of this. I watched the assessment happen in real time behind her eyes. She left without asking for what she had come for. I went to find Prescott, Vincent's head of operations, the next morning. My stepsister visited yesterday, I said. I would like to know if she speaks to any of the household staff after she leaves. Prescott looked at me. I will let you know, he said. He let me know 3 days later. She had spoken to a maid named Rowena who had been disciplined the previous week for refusing to bring clean linens to the north wing. Iris had spoken with Rowena for 30 minutes in a cafe 2 streets from the estate. I sat with this information. Filed it. He came home bleeding on a Thursday. Not dramatically. He came through the side door the way he came through the side door when he did not want the main staff to observe his arrival, and I was in the corridor, and I saw the dark stain on his sleeve before he saw me. Come, I said. He looked at me. Kitchen, I said. Sit down. He sat. I cleaned and dressed the wound with the efficiency of someone who had been the person who cleaned and dressed things her entire life. My mother had believed in the specific value of home remedies, not from stubbornness but from a practical understanding of what was available and what was effective and what was unnecessary. His hands were still while I worked. After a while he said, "Where did you learn this?" "My mother," I said. He was quiet. "What was she like?" he said. I looked at the work I was doing. She was the kind of person, I said, who understood that the most important things are not the large things. She made ordinary days feel like they were worth having. Pause. She left me a cottage. Her childhood home. It is the only thing I have from her. I know about the cottage, he said. Prescott found the deed in your bag during the security assessment. I looked up. The deed is yours, he said. I have had it placed in a legal structure that cannot be accessed or contested by anyone connected to the Johnson household. It is simply yours. I looked at him. Why? Said. He looked at his hands. The one I had been working on and the one that was uninjured. Because your father used it as a threat against you to get you into this house, he said. And whatever this arrangement is, that is not something I am willing to be a beneficiary of. I finished wrapping the wound. Sat back. Thank you, I said. He looked at me with the expression that had been developing across the weeks of shared meals and library nights, and the East Garden and the lavender soap and the emerald dress. The expression of a man who is in the process of revising a conclusion he had reached about himself. The cottage will be ready for you, he said, whenever this arrangement ends. Or before if you choose. I looked at my hands. I am not ready to go, I said. And it was true with the specific completeness of something said without preparation and therefore without performance. I am not ready yet. He held my hand for a moment. Then he stood and went to his study. I sat in the kitchen with my mother's remedies and the clean linen, and I breathed. The emergency call came at 11. I heard the household respond to it from the north wing. The specific quality of urgent movement that a large staff makes when something requires immediate action. Vincent's voice from the main floor was brief and operational. The sound of vehicles. I went to the doorway of my room. Prescott was in the corridor. Stay in the wing, he said. An issue with one of the perimeter installations. Mr. Capone is handling it. Lock the door. I locked the door. I went back to the chair by the window where I had been sewing, and I sat with my mother's scarf and I worked. At 12:40 I smelled it. Smoke. Not the faint smoke of a fireplace. The specific dense quality of smoke that means something is burning nearby and the nearby is getting closer. I went to the door. The handle was warm. I did not open it. I looked at the window. The north wing was on the second floor. The drop was significant but survivable with the right approach. I assessed this with the rapid calm of someone who has had to make practical calculations in difficult circumstances before. Then the smoke came under the door, and I understood the specific geometry of the situation. The door was the exit. The door was blocked. I went to the window and I opened it and I looked at the drop and I assessed it again, and I was reaching for the frame when the smoke thickened and the specific quality of the air changed. And my vision went wrong in the way vision goes wrong when the body is managing something it was not designed to manage for long. I reached for the bag beside the chair. My mother's deed. The jewelry box. Held them. I sat on the floor where the air was cleaner, and I breathed carefully. And I waited because waiting was the only remaining option. And I was very good at waiting. And I thought about the cottage and the dried lavender and the old wood and my mother's face. And I held the deed against my chest, and I breathed. Vincent understood what the emergency call was at 12:52. Prescott reached him by phone with a specific clip deficiency of someone delivering bad news as quickly as possible. The north wing. Fire in the connecting corridor. Hazel is locked inside. He was back at the estate in 9 minutes. The north wing was visible from the entrance. The smoke from the corridor window. The specific quality of a fire that has been burning for some time and is making decisions about where it goes next. He went in. Not through the burning corridor. Through the connecting passage on the east side, which most of the staff did not know existed because it had been sealed for years, and because he had been the one who sealed it. He knew exactly where the panel was and how to open it. He found her on the floor. She was conscious but barely. Her breathing was the labored breathing of lungs that had been managing smoke for too long. She was on the floor by the window with her bag clutched against her chest and her hands around the deed. He lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, and he carried her out through the east passage and into the courtyard, where the air was clean and Prescott's medical team was already positioned. He sat beside her on the grass while the medical team worked, and he looked at his own hands, which were shaking, which had not happened in 15 years of holding things that should have made them shake. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. The deed, she said. Her voice was wrecked from the smoke. Have it, he said. She looked at the sky. I knew you would come, she said. He sat with this for a long time. The hospital kept her for 4 days. He was there for all of them. On the second day, she was strong enough to talk properly. He sat in the chair beside her bed in his best suit, and she looked at him with the gray eyes that carried something different now from anything he had seen in them before. Not the careful watchfulness. Not the compound of invisibility and resilience. Something clear and direct and entirely itself. Who paid the maid? He said. He looked at her. We found kerosene-soaked fabric in Rowena's quarters, he said. She has confessed. She was paid. By Iris, Hazel said. Yes, he said. She looked at the ceiling. He waited. How do you want them to suffer? He said. The question he had been waiting to ask since Rowena's confession arrived. The question he had been prepared to follow through on with the specific total commitment of a man for whom this category of response was not hypothetical. Hazel looked at the deed on the bedside table. It was singed at the corner from where she had held it against her chest in the smoke. The damage was cosmetic. The document was intact. I do not want them to suffer, she said. He looked at her. I want them to disappear, she said. From everything. From the accounts, from the assets, from any claim on anything connected to me or to my mother's name. He paused. I want Iris to spend the rest of her life watching what she tried to destroy and understanding that her trying did not work. Another pause. That is enough. That is more than enough. He looked at her. That is not what I expected, he said. I know, she said. I am not interested in being expected. He was quiet for a moment. You could ask me to burn it all down, he said. I would. I know you would, she said. That is exactly why I am not asking. She looked at him with clear, direct eyes. The girl who walked into that marriage was afraid of the dark, she said. She is not here anymore. She picked up the deed. I know what I want now. I know what is mine. I know what I am willing to do to protect it and what I am not willing to become to do the protecting. He paused. The fire did not take that from me. Gave it to me. He looked at her for a long time. He thought about 15 years of being told the curse was his and being cold enough and distant enough that the thing he feared would not find anything in him to attach to. He thought about lavender soap and emerald silk and a woman who repaired things in the quiet hours and cleared overgrown gardens and made meals that reached something in him that had not been reached in a very long time. He thought about carrying her out of a burning corridor and feeling his hands shake. Cottage, he said. When you are ready. Yes, she said. When I am ready. She looked at the singed deed. Survived, she said. Not with relief. With the specific quiet satisfaction of someone who had chosen what to hold on to in the worst moment and had held on to the right thing. She was discharged on a Thursday. The legal documentation had been prepared in the days she was in the hospital. Not by Vincent's primary firm but by a separate team, operating with a specific thoroughness of people who had been instructed to leave nothing that could be subsequently contested. The Johnson household's assets, such as they were reviewed and restructured. The Capone organization's claim, which had been the mechanism of everything that followed, was formally settled and closed. Her father received what the settlement entitled him to. Nothing more. Iris's accounts, which had been funded through a combination of their father's diminishing resources and what Rowena's confession had revealed about certain transfers, were similarly reviewed and reduced to their accurate value. There was no announcement. There was no visible punishment. There was simply the specific result that Hazel had asked for. The disappearance of everything they had assumed was theirs. The accounts empty. The prospects were reduced to what could be earned rather than inherited or taken. The name is still present, but attached to nothing that anyone in the city's power landscape would need to acknowledge. Iris would spend the rest of her life looking at the name Capone in the city's financial and social architecture, and understanding that she had tried to burn away the woman beneath it and had failed completely. That was the suffering Hazel had chosen. Not pain. Irrelevance. It was, she had decided, considerably more accurate. She stood in the east garden of the Capone estate on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after she was discharged. The lavender was blooming again. She had tended it in the weeks before the fire, and it had survived the smoke from the corridor with the specific resilience of plants that have been growing in a space for long enough that the space itself supports their continuation. She heard his footsteps. She had learned them in the weeks of the arrangement. The specific weight and rhythm of them. He stood beside her. They looked at the lavender. Prescott tells me, he said, that you have been managing the East Garden restoration. The gardeners needed direction, she said. I had thoughts about the direction. You always do, he said. She looked at him. At the man who had told her in a limo that she was a transaction and who had sat beside her hospital bed for 4 days, and whose hands had been shaking when he carried her out of a burning corridor. The arrangement, she said. 2 years. Yes, he said. I want to renegotiate it, she said. He looked at her. The terms, as currently structured, she said, were designed for 2 people who did not know each other. We are not those people anymore. He was quiet. What terms would you propose? He said. She looked at the lavender. I would propose, she said, that the arrangement become something that does not have a term. That it becomes simply what it has been becoming, without the structure of expiration around it. He looked at her for a long time. Curse, he said, is not real, she said. It was a story told about you by people who found it useful. I am not a superstitious person. The women who came before were placed in an impossible situation by people who did not care whether they survived it, she said. I was placed in the same situation. I survived it. Not because you are different from what they said. 'Cause I am. He looked at her. At the woman who had cleaned floors. She had not been asked to clean and repair her mother's scarves in the quiet hours, and cook meals that reached something in him that had not been reached in a long time, and stood in the east garden of his estate tending lavender that had survived everything. Cottage, he said. Will always be mine, she said. That does not change. I need a place that is entirely mine. I know, he said. But I do not need to live there, she said. Not yet. He reached out. He took her hand. Not as a transaction. Not as possession. With the specific careful intention of someone who has learned, late and at considerable cost, that the things worth holding require you to hold them correctly. She did not pull away. She looked at the lavender and the east garden and the estate that had been a cold house when she arrived, and that had warmth in it now. Not from the stone or the marble or the iron gates, but from the specific daily accumulation of someone who knew how to make warmth from ordinary things. She thought about her mother. About the cottage and the dried lavender and the deed with a singed corner sitting in the cedar box in her room. Intact, hers, untouchable now by anyone who had ever tried to use it against her. She thought about Iris in the city, watching the name Capone operate at the level it operated at and understanding that the sister she had tried to erase with kerosene and a paid servant and the cowardice of someone who had always let other people take the consequences of her choices was still here. Was more here, in fact, than she had ever been. She thought, I did not survive this quietly. I survived it loudly, in the way of someone who has finally understood the difference between existing and living. And I am not finished yet. To everyone who was made the second option by the people who should have put them first. To everyone whose most precious thing was used as leverage against them. To everyone who stayed soft when the world rewarded hardness and discovered that softness, properly understood, is not weakness but a form of power that outlasts almost everything. You do not have to burn the world down to win. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is simply become impossible to erase. If this story reached you, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Tell us which moment stayed with you longest. Take care of yourselves. We will see you in the next story.